Thinking about it, bear with me. Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Folkestone, Hythe District and Parish Council's Joint Committee. Please note this meeting is being streamed live to the internet. Please could all members ensure their microphone is set to mute unless they are speaking to reduce any background noise. So with that being said, we'll move on to the first item, which is to appoint a chair. So as members are aware, the chair alternates between a district councillor and a parish/town councillor every meeting. The committee is to appoint a parish and town councillor for the chair of this meeting. Do we have any proposals?
I propose Frank Hobbs to chair the meeting.
Happy to second.
Okay, thank you very much. I shall hand over to you, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jay.
Apologies, sorry, can I just have a show of hands? Just so we can start. Yep, brilliant. Okay, I shall hand over to you.
Have you got the agenda to stick up on the screen?
Bear with me.
I wasn't able to download it for some reason or the other.
Okay.
Right. Now it's there. Apologies for absence. Have we got any?
We have one apology from Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Has any member of this meeting got any interests which fall under the categories as shown? I would be very surprised if they had. But obviously, if something crops up during the meeting, then you should declare it immediately then, if necessary. Moving on down. Minutes of the last meeting have been circulated. Are you all happy that they are correct? Those of you who were there.
Happy to propose their acceptance.
Thank you, Tim. Seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kirsten. Okay, so we move on to planning reforms and design codes. I'm assuming this is you, is it, Adrian?
Yes, hopefully you can all hear me okay. I was going to do a joint presentation with my colleague Rebecca, so if I can share my screen. I'm having a bit of problem with the screen share.
It did work, Adrian. We could see it.
Could you hear me? It seems to mute me when I share the screen.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you.
Try again. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Apologies for that. Yeah, we are going to do a short presentation on the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which recently got royal assent. So we're going to do a two-part presentation. I was going to kick off with to talk about local plans and the implications for local plans. And then Rebecca was going to follow up to talk about design codes, which is a big part of the new legislation. So local plan reforms, as you probably all know, hopefully, local plan is a document that sets out the development strategy for the district for the next 15 to 20 years, kind of where development goes and how much development there should be, and you know, which areas are protected and issues like that. The government has been working on planning reforms for quite some time now. So there was a planning white paper called Planning for the Future, which was in 2020, and that put forward some really radical changes to the planning system. Some of the more radical ideas have been dropped, but I think it's still quite a fundamental change to the system, what is coming through. A lot of the ideas were picked up in the Levelling Up white paper in 2022. And alongside that, there have been a number of consultations on the detail of the proposals. And there was one at the end of last year and one this year, which kicked off in July and finished in October. And we as a district council gave our comments to that consultation in October. And that was particularly about the local plan reforms. So I think we've talked about this before to the joint parish and town councils on a few occasions, but what's changed since we last spoke to you is that the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which has been going through Parliament for some time, has now received royal assent and has become law, and that happened at the end of last month. So that kind of sets out the broad framework in law. There is still more to come, which will come forward through secondary legislation and guidance. I think the second bullet point is my own view, really, but I think it introduces the most far-reaching reforms of the local plan system for about 20 years. It has less to say about development management. And so some of the key areas we were going to touch on tonight are national development management policies, new local plans and the timetable for preparing them, digital planning, which is a big theme of the government's planning reforms. And I was then going to talk about some other provisions that are in the new Act and how it's going to be implemented. And then at the end, Rebecca is going to pick up on design codes, which, as I say, is a big part of the new planning system. So kicking off national development management policies, the new Act, it creates powers for the government to bring in national development management policies. So we don't have any at the moment, but the legal hook is there in the new Act. And essentially what you have at the moment at the national level is the National Planning Policy Framework and national guidance, but the government is intending to replace all of that with new national development management policies, and they will have an increased status in the new system. And they will be equal in sort of status to the local plan, but where there is any conflict, it's the national policies that will have weight. So you could perhaps say that it's more of a sort of centralisation of power of the planning system. As I say, none have been published yet, so we don't know what they look like, but the Act gives the government the powers to introduce them. And so they will replace, as I say, they will replace existing guidance and policy, but with an increased status. So I think it's worth being aware of them because they may be relevant to you as parish and town councils. If you're commenting on a planning application in the future, then you need to be aware of these national policies because they will have as much weight as the local plan policies. You know, if you're supporting or objecting to a planning application in your areas. The new local plans. The government is continually frustrated at the lack of progress that local planning authorities are making in terms of getting up-to-date plans in place. And the government says only around a third of local authorities have an up-to-date plan. And the government classifies that as a plan that was adopted within the last 5 years. We in Folkestone Hythe have not one, but 2 up-to-date plans, which were adopted in 2020 and 2022. But that said, it is a very onerous task to get a local plan through the process, and the government says that the average time it takes to produce a local plan is 7 years. And the government says that this, you know, creates a lot of uncertainty for communities and holds back development. So to try and force the pace, so to speak, with local authorities, the government has introduced a new 30-month timetable to prepare a local plan. And that will be a mandatory timetable. And that will be very challenging for all local authorities. The core strategy review that we adopted 2022, that took us 48 months from start to finish. So we would have to reduce the time we take by almost 1.5 years to be able to meet the government's timetable. The idea is that the new local plans will focus on the local vision and local policies, and that they shouldn't repeat what's at the national level. And it is fair to say that some local plans do have a lot of policies that more or less mirror what's already at in the national planning policy framework. So the government's idea is we can produce plans much more quickly if we don't have to worry about that excess detail. And another feature of the new system is that the planning inspectorate will be involved throughout the process and will examine plans earlier on, so that if a local authority is going wrong, so to speak, that should hopefully be picked up much earlier in the process. At the moment, a local authority can go all the way through the process and only find out at the very end in the public examination if they've done it right. For example, there's a local authority, a district council in Surrey, not a million miles from us, that it first started preparing its local plan 8 years ago, and it has been in a local plan examination for 4 years. And it recently found out that the inspector recently wrote to them and said, I don't think your plan is sound, and there's no way it can be made sound. And so in effect, they have to start again from the very beginning of the process, having spent 8 years preparing it. So, you know, you can see it is a very onerous task for local authorities, and that there's quite a large risk of failure along the way. So here is the local plan timetable as produced in the most recent government consultation that I spoke about earlier. There will be a short sort of early preparation period of 4 months, and then the starting gun is fired, and a local authority will have 23 months to draft its plan and take it out to consultation. There will be 2 periods of public consultation on an early version of the plan and on the draft plan. There will be 3 gateway assessments, and these are kind of health checks by planning inspectors throughout the process. At the end of that, if the local planning authority gets the go-ahead from the planning inspectorate, they can take the plan to examination. And the government says the public examination should last no longer than 6 months. We, for the core strategy review, had an examination of almost 24 months. And that was in large part because we had continual problems trying to get agreement with National Highways. And then at the end, there's a period of 1 month for the local authority to finalise the plan and adopt it. So that kind of is a brief outline. Local authorities will have to produce plans much more quickly, and they have to review them almost continually. Public engagement. This is another sort of theme of the government's reforms. We, as a local planning authority, will have there will be a new requirement to assist, and that is to help us secure the input of infrastructure providers and national agencies such as the Highways Agency and others. So we can serve notice on those organisations and ask them to assist us in our local plan, but I have to say it's not yet clear what, if any, enforcement powers we would have to force those organisations to come to the table. Digital tools is a big theme. The government is very keen that we use as much digital engagement as possible, and I think that's for 2 reasons really. One is to produce the local plan much more quickly, and the other is that the government sees that as drawing in a wider kind of variety of people, and particularly the young people. And the government thinks that young people aren't much engaged in the process, and that currently local plans are kind of long PDF documents that only the very dedicated would read through. And I think to be fair, there is some truth in that. So the government sees digital tools as being a way forward to get a much wider buy-in from local people. And one of the government's consultations points to a pilot by Epsom Borough Council where they were said to have secured much more representation from younger people and people who hadn't engaged in planning before. And as an example, on the next slide, I was just going to play a little model to show you. This has been produced by some of my colleagues in the Economic Development Department, and they are sort of trialing it for consultation on the regeneration of Folkestone Town Centre. And I understand this is going to be sort of opened up to the public tomorrow and on Saturday, and they're having exhibitions at the Bouverie Centre at Bouverie Place, and I think there are going to be sort of virtual reality fly-throughs. So if I can, I will play a little video. There's no sound to this, I don't think so, but it just shows what you can do with digital models. It's a model of obviously of Folkestone, and with a particular focus on the town centre. So hopefully, if the technology is working, you will be able to see a little fly through. And this has been created from sort of satellite imagery, and I think and some of the more detailed some of the more detailed layouts are done by walking the site, I think, and taking images. But so we're kind of seeing a panorama, and then it flies through past Folkestone Central Station and along to the town centre and the Saga building and the bus station there. And they're going to, as I say, they're going to use this tomorrow as an illustration and of what you could do, and also to ask the public for comments and ways that the spaces could be improved, really. So, I think it's really good when you've got sort of concrete proposals to put forward, a way of engaging people. But I think for our purposes, for the local plan, it is a bit more we are kind of involved much earlier in the process, so we don't necessarily have the detail to show. So I think it remains to be seen, you know, exactly how we can use digital models to try and engage on a local plan, because we really only have a line around a site sometimes. So, but anyway, I just thought I'd show you that. Other provisions in the Acts, there is much more opportunity for the government to intervene where local authorities aren't making progress on preparing a local plan. There are already, it's got to be said, powers of intervention by the Secretary of State, but the new Act draws that all together. And on the slide there are a couple of headlines from the planning press about some recent interventions. The Secretary of State has intervened on Spelthorne District Council, which is in Surrey. They were minded to pause work on their local plan to work out what all these planning reforms mean for them. But the Secretary of State wrote to the council and said, you know, you are not to pause your plan. You haven't got an up-to-date plan. You are to make fast progress with adopting your plan. And the second example is from the Housing Minister, who has said that she would intervene wherever was necessary in to get a local plan adopted and finished. That Housing Secretary, Rachel McLean, was unfortunately one of the victims of the recent cabinet reshuffle, but there is now a new Housing Minister called Lee Rowley, but with no reason to think that the message will be any different from the new minister, and they will continue to step in where they feel that local authorities aren't making progress, because as I said at the beginning, there's only around a third of local authorities throughout England have an up-to-date plan in place. So other provisions, as I said, there is greater powers to intervene, and there will be a new local plan commissioner who can be appointed to take over a plan where an authority is not making progress. And those powers also extend to where an authority is not meeting its duty to prepare a design code. There are some other elements to the Act. There is greater protection given to registered parks and gardens and protected recs, and we have 2 registered parks and gardens in our district, and there is also a protected rec site as well. The Act also gives more details on what a neighbourhood plan may include. Currently, the legislation is the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. That doesn't really give a lot of detail, but the new Act says what you can include in a neighbourhood plan. I don't think there are any surprises there. You know, it's policies in relation to development, also to design of development and infrastructure. And the new legislation says that any policies a neighbourhood plan has must be designed to secure the mitigation and adaptation to climate change. And the recent consultation that I mentioned, it had a sentence in there to say that arrangements for neighbourhood plans will be set out in due course. So that was in the July consultation, but so far as I'm aware, there's been nothing more since then. But that said, you know, the government is very keen on neighbourhood plans. It has been a big success of some of the recent planning reforms, and you know, the government is keen to see town and parish councils produce neighbourhood plans, but it's just a question of how they sort of fit into this new system, really. Implementation. What we have really with the new Act is a broad framework. We don't have a lot of the detail. That will likely follow later this year and next year with secondary legislation and guidance. The government has said it wants everything in place by 2024 so that local authorities can crack on and produce their new local plans under the new system. There has been some concern expressed that you might end up with a huge number of planning authorities all producing their plans at exactly the same time, and there won't be enough planning inspectors or capacity to deal with it all. So it's likely that there will be cohorts of authorities going through in a sort of phased way. We as Folkestone and Hythe District Council have expressed our interest in being one of the front runners. The government has said it will look at front runners who have an up-to-date local plan in place and have a good track record of preparing local plans, and I think we are one of those authorities, but we're waiting more of the detail there, and the government has said that it will provide additional support to those front runner authorities to make the whole system work. So that's kind of a brief run through from me. Perhaps if we pause for any questions before the next the final part of the presentation is will be design codes. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I can't see everybody, so I'll have to shout it. I can only see Kirsten, Graham and Tim on the screen, so everybody else has disappeared. I know you're there, but Paul's put his hand up. Paul? You're still muted. Oh,
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Thank you very much, Adrian, for that presentation. I think it's put very succinctly the changes that are being proposed and the position that the district council has put itself in, and I fully support what you just said with regard to us being part of the early uptake and the leader in this. It's better to be a leader than a follower in things such as this. And again, I'll just like to thank Adrian for his input. But one thing, if I may, just on neighbourhood plans, there's the advice for that has not been issued yet in terms of how that's going to look like in the new system. That's correct, isn't it? That's what you just said. Is that correct?
I think, yeah, we've got the broad outline in the Act of what they can contain. I think probably what remains is how they're sequenced, really, because a neighbourhood plan has to fit with a local plan. And so it, depending on what stage a parish or town council may be at, they would have to make sure that they didn't sort of align their neighbourhood plan to a local plan that was to become out of date, really. So I don't think there will be anything fundamental to change. It's just a question of making sure that the town or parish prepares it in the right manner, and so that it will sit under the right plan, really. We do have one going on at the moment at Lyminge, and so we'll just have to see how this plays out, and give the parish what advice we can on that, really. But I think it's more a question of sequencing than of any fundamental kind of changes.
Okay, thank you for that. And just one more thing, if I may, just in terms of conservation areas, there was in the presentation, there were a couple of points about how the designated parks and things and rec sites and that are going to be pulled in and given the same level of well, I don't know how you say it really, but importance that's placed on conservation areas. So as part of the consultation with local councils, will we be involved with any redrafting of the conservation areas that we already have in place in our towns and villages?
So yes, if parishes or towns want to look at their conservation areas, we would work with them. What I think the Act is talking about is the sort of fundamentals behind that, rather than any change in area or extent. It's the Act talks about protected recs and registered parks and gardens, and I think what it's doing, I haven't studied it in detail, it's chapter 3 of the Act. I think what it's doing in effect is saying that when you have developments that might impact on those things, you've got to take account of the setting of the park and garden, and have regard to preserving and enhancing that. So I think what this is doing is sort of upping the protection for parks and gardens and recs and putting it on an equal footing with conservation areas, really. So.
Okay, thanks, Adrian. Thank you.
Adrian, if I may. Hello.
Hello, Roger. Yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Can I chair? Yeah. Thank you. I think, Adrian, that Lyminge is the one you've referred to, and you have us here representing Lyminge. I think we're going to be very concerned to have some detailed briefing on this, to see in particular, because as you say, we are underway with our neighbourhood plan, and it would be a shame to either waste some of the work we've done already or any work which is foreseen, which is actually underway now.
Yeah.
Would we be able to get some early briefing from you guys, particularly on the aspect of conservation areas? Because I think there's a difference of opinion between what you've just said and what other colleagues have said about designate. We haven't got a designated conservation area, and we believe we want one. So we would probably be looking to get some clarification on that.
Yeah, in terms of conservation areas, that's a district council function. But in terms of the relationship between the neighbourhood plan and the national legislation, there isn't a lot of detail yet. So, but I think it's just a question of making sure that when the guidance and the secondary legislation comes out, we are aware of what it's saying, really. But I don't think the government would want local communities to stop the excellent work they're doing in terms of producing their neighbourhood plans. It's just to be aware that there is this changing legislative environment, really, to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. We have no intention of stopping what we're doing. We want to make sure, as you said, that we ensure that the direction of travel we're going on is aligned to this potential new act.
And
in particular, the protection afforded by conservation areas, which we don't have at the moment.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's something we can go into in detail, because if you talk to David Whittington, you'll find a different view expressed.
Anything else? Anybody else? I can't see any hands or people waving frantically. In which case, back to you again.
Frank, can I come in?
Hello, Graham, yes.
Back to neighbourhood plan. As you realise, we are the parish with a neighbourhood plan. We could be really out of step with new regulations.
Yeah, with any neighbourhood plan, it would have to be renewed and reviewed, as we as a district council have to review our local plan, and you know, the longer the local plan is in place, the more out of date it becomes. So at some point, an existing neighbourhood plan would have to be reviewed. So I think it's probably about thinking about when you want to time that review and making sure that the review fits in with what's coming from the new legislation, really. So.
I think we're about 4 or 5 years in.
Yeah. So the government, I mean, for us as a district council, the government says that, you know, you've got to see how your plan is operating. Is it having the effect that you wanted it to have when you brought it in? Are there some new issues that have come along that need to be addressed? And then from that, you know, you need to think about, is it perhaps a review of a small part of it, or is it a total review? So it's a continual process of reviewing it and monitoring it, and then reviewing it again. So it might be worth thinking about, you know, as you say, as it is now 4 years old, it might be worth thinking about how you review it, and thinking about whether you think it's had the effect that you wanted when you created it, really.
That's bound to happen anyway. Well, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody? Obviously not. Back to you then, Adrian.
Yeah, so I was going to, if you can still see the screen, I was going to hand over to my colleague Rebecca, and she hopefully will be able to talk through design codes, which is a big part of the new legislation, and it's something we're grappling with at the moment. So.
Thank you, Adrian. Thanks. So if you could just go on to the first slide for me. Thank you. So the new Levelling Up and Regeneration Act requires local authorities to create area-wide design codes. A design code is a collection of design principles that help local authorities and communities to define what good looks like in their area. Codes are used as a tool for development management and help to make it clear for applicants what's required before submitting a planning application. The idea is that this should speed up the planning process and lead to more beautiful places. This slide shows that in recent years, beauty and design have begun to emerge as an important part of placemaking, leading up to the requirement within the Act for all local planning authorities to have a design code in place, covering their entire area. The Act sets out that area-wide codes will be a framework for which subsequent detailed design codes can come forward. Local authorities will need to prepare and adopt these codes as part of their local plan or as a supplementary plan, giving the design requirements set within them the weight of the development plan in decision making. When local authorities are not making progress with a design code, the Secretary of State will have powers to intervene, as I think Adrian mentioned. Could we have the next slide, please? So the government has published guidance which should be used when producing a code. That's the National Design Guide, which outlines and illustrates the government's priorities for well-designed places in the form of 10 key characteristics, which we're encouraged to use in the creation of design codes to raise design standards. That's shown on the left with the wheel. Then we have the National Model Design Code, which expands on the 10 characteristics and provides a common framework for design. This one is a toolkit to guide authorities on the design parameters and issues that need to be covered when producing design codes, as well as methods to capture and reflect the views of the local community. However, this guidance was produced before the area-wide requirement was introduced, and it does seem likely that it will be reviewed and updated to reflect these changes. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So, with testing the guidance, in recent years, the government has funded 2 separate Pathfinder programmes to test the process of local authority-led teams putting the National Model Design Code into practice at different scales and in areas across the country with different development pressures. The first local authority on the Pathfinder programme to adopt an area-wide design code as a supplementary planning document is the Lake District National Park Authority, who've adopted their rural code in September 23, so very recently. The code guides decision-making on planning applications for new houses, house extensions, conversions and shop fronts, because these are the areas that they had most applications submitted for. So we were going to play you a little clip, which was from a promotional video they prepared, but unfortunately it wasn't working properly when Adrian and I tested it, so we will circulate the link so you can all check it out afterwards if you wish. This was prepared before they adopted the document when they were carrying out a consultation, and it's quite an interesting little video, so if you do have chance, I recommend it. So the adopted design code, what they actually adopted in September, is highly visual, it's fully online, it's user-friendly, and it's intended to be used by applicants of all levels of expertise. And users are guided through a number of stages with a final checklist, which reminds them what aspects of design apply to their proposals. And then the same checklist is then used by the planning officer who assesses the application. Next slide, please. Yep, the sound's still not working on the video. Sorry, bear with us, we'll get to the next slide. Thank you. So the findings from the Pathfinders are still coming out, and so far there's been some useful feedback, but it's clear that there's still lots to learn, especially when it comes to area-wide codes, which are very new. We know that producing design codes in-house may have its challenges and certainly could take time, and it would be important to establish what resources, skills and capacity we will have in-house. Although design coding will also be an opportunity for upskilling, so there are positives. So what we need to think about is, what do we want our design code to do? Establishing the scope, objective and vision for the code at the start of the process would be extremely important, and you cannot code for everything. And from the feedback, it seems likely that area-wide codes will be less detailed and more strategic in scope. The code will need to take into account national and local planning policies and have a strong baseline evidence base. And the code will need to be clear, brief and visual, setting definitive requirements through the use of language such as the words must, will and required, so that design can be unambiguously conform or not conform. It needs to be really clear. The code needs to be practical. It should have an easy to use checklist, as we heard the Lake Districts did, and it needs to be understood by both professionals and non-professionals. therefore speeding up the planning application process at the end. Engagement will be key and needs to start right at the outset and be part of the code's development throughout. It's essential to find out what people really like so that the code is based on robust evidence that's been obtained on what's popular about the design and character of an area. Design coding is an opportunity to harness local talent, aspirations and knowledge through a collaborative approach. I think what we've gained from the feedback is that area-wide design codes can help reinforce a local authority's overarching design vision. They can act as a framework for clarifying design expectations at different scales. They can identify area types for design coding, or they can focus on particular design priorities, such as perhaps streets or public spaces, or they can prioritise particular types of development. Once a framework is in place, more detailed design codes can then come forward, prepared perhaps for specific areas or sites when needed. So the first stage of this has recently taken place. So officers from the council, we have worked jointly with other East Kent authorities to bid for funding from the Planning Skills Delivery Fund for specialist and expert resource for implementing design codes. So if successful, this would give all the authorities additional resources, as well as shared officer skills from across the 5 East Kent authorities that we've partnered with for this funding bid. And the outcome of this will determine the pace that we're able to work on our area-wide code. At the moment, until we know the outcome of the funding bid, timings going forward are unknown. But we feel it's really important to brief you all on what will be coming up in the near future, and also to let you know that we'll be back to involve parish and town councils at a later date and to find out a lot more about your areas. Thank you. So I think now we have another question.
Thank you, Rebecca. Paul's got his hand up.
Oh, hi there. Yeah, thank you very much. Again, thank you very much for that, Rebecca. The one question I have really relates to engagement with the with town and parish councils, and just on the design. So, if you look at Sandgate currently, Sandgate currently have their design statement, which is a document which can be used to supplement, and guide planning in a particular area. So is the intent, I know we couldn't see what they were doing at the Lake District, but is the intent that we would all have something similar to what Sandgate already have in place that actually helps them do what they're doing, that we would be encouraged to do the same kind of thing, and then have that discussion with the district council?
So Adrian, shall I answer?
Yeah, by all means, yeah.
Yeah. From what I understand at the moment, from the detail that's come out, is that authorities that have attempted an area-wide code, it's been at a more strategic level. So they might have perhaps grouped area types, but I don't think they haven't been able to go into great detail across the whole of the district. It might be that, yeah, you've gone, it depends what the priorities are really, and that's what we need to start the process off by determining what the authority's priorities for design are. And then once we have that in place, we will look across the whole of the district and see perhaps what areas, where an area might be seeing growth and where it's then a priority to have more detail. And it's setting up that framework, so then areas could, we could focus more in areas as it was needed in the long term. I don't know if you've got any more thoughts, Adrian.
Yeah, and also the sort of guidance says, we're not necessarily starting from a blank sheet. So where there is existing guidance like the Sandgate design statement, we should work from that and make sure we're not cutting across that. And we also have quite a lot of guidance for produced by the Kent Downs Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty Unit. So we would use that as well. But as Rebecca says, it's sort of finding its way really. But the impression I got was that while you might have this overarching document at the district level, there will be scope for local parishes and town councils to produce their sort of element of it, which would sit below it. And perhaps you would deal with the more strategic issues at the district levels, like I don't know, sort of energy efficiency or landscape improvement, and then perhaps at the more local level you might focus on the detail of local character or the materials and the styles of building or whatever it might be.
Excellent. No, thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Oh. We're back again. I can see you all now. Yeah, anything else anybody wanted to bring up on that? No? In which case, we thank Adrian and Rebecca for their presentations. And they will obviously go out, presumably James with Jake, I mean with the minutes.
Yes, that's correct. I'll attach them to the minutes along with the links.
Thank you. In which case, that, I believe, is the end of the agenda, is it not?
Yes, that is.
Thank you for your attendance. If I could have a word with Jake in a minute before he disappears.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'd like to say thank you very much to Adrian and Rebecca.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.